All right, welcome to lesson 6 on solving and graphing inequalities. Now, just to repeat, with this module style learning, you are in charge of your own learning, so feel free to fast forward, pause, or rewind the video as you feel necessary. So when we are solving inequalities, we are actually going to follow very similar steps that we would follow if we were solving an equation. However, we must follow this golden rule. When we multiply or divide both sides of an inequality by a negative number, we have to flip the inequality sign. Okay? So we're going to follow these steps. Step 1, we're going to use opposite operations in order to isolate the variable, meaning we're going to use opposite operations to try to get the variable by itself. We're going to do the same thing to both sides of the inequality. So let's go ahead. I'm going to actually skip around with some of my examples. I'm going to skip example number 1, but you can feel free to go through and look at it with the answer key to the notes if you feel that you want to go over that one. So we're going to look at example number 2. Negative 99 is greater than y minus 27. Now I'm going to go ahead and use the additive inverse property to change the subtraction sign to addition and then add a negative sign to the number to the right. So now I have negative 99 is greater than y plus negative 27. Now my goal is to get y by itself on the right side of the inequality sign. So what I want to do is get rid of this addition. What I want to do is get rid of this addition of negative 27 that's right here. So in order to do that, I'm going to take negative 27 and add 27 in order to get to 0. This cancels this out because negative 27 plus 27 equals 0. Now whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So I'm going to take negative 99 and I'm going to add 27. Now negative 99 plus 27 is negative 72. And I have my greater than sign, y. So negative 72 has to be greater than y. Now, we really like to be able to have the variable on the left-hand side of the inequality. So I can go ahead and rewrite this with y on the left-hand side and negative 72 on the right-hand side, as long as I go ahead and I flip that sign. So we can see that in the first example, the open part of my Pac-Man is facing towards the negative 72, and in my second example, the open side of the Pac-Man is again facing towards the 72. So either of these answers would be considered correct. Now, if I was to go ahead and graph this inequality, remember that if the variable is on the left side of the inequality, then the inequality sign is pointing in the direction that we need to shade. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug any value to the right or left of the dot for the variable. If this is true, then I'm going to shade that side of the inequality. If it's false, then I'm going to shade the other side of the inequality. So if I look here with example number 2, I've got my number line, and I know that y has to be less than 72, so I'm going to put an open dot on 72, on negative 72, I'm sorry, and y has to be less than that, so my line is going to go to the left. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and go over example 3. I'm going to be skipping example 4, but if you want to pause the video and look at my work, feel free to do so. So example 3 says negative 18d is less than or equal to negative 54. So in this case, I've got negative 18 times d. There's a little multiplication sign in there. And remember that I'm trying to get rid of that negative 18 and that multiplication sign in there. In order to do that, I'm going to reverse my operation. So instead of multiplying by negative 18, I'm going to divide by negative 18. And this is going to cancel this out and get rid of negative 18. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So I'm going to take negative 54 and divide it by negative 18. Okay, now right away, since I'm dividing by a negative number, okay, I have to flip this inequality sign. So down here in my answer, I'm going to change this less than or equal to sign to a greater than or equal to sign, okay? Now I can solve negative 54 divided by 18, which is positive 3. And on the left side of my inequality, all I have left is d, so I know that d has to be greater than or equal to 3. I can go ahead and graph this on my number line by, since d is greater than or equal to, I'm going to put a closed dot on the number 3, and I'm going to draw my arrow in the direction of my sign. Now we're going to go ahead and look at a harder example. Okay, again, I am going to skip example number 5, but you can feel free to take a look at the answer key to the notes and fill it in and ask a teacher if you have any questions. So example 6 says 120 minus 2n is less than or equal to 26. So again, I'm going to use my additive inverse property to change the subtraction to addition of the opposite. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get rid of my constant first. So since I have positive 120, I want to get rid of that. So I'm going to subtract 120 from both sides. Now on my left-hand side, that cancels the 120 out. That gets rid of it. And on the right-hand side, I am getting 26 minus 120, which should be negative 94. Okay? My sign is staying the same because I'm only subtracting 120. Okay, so my sign is going to stay identical. And on the left-hand side of my sign, I have my negative 2n left over. Now, in order to get n by itself, I have negative 2n, which means I've got negative 2 times n, and I want to get rid of that. So in order to get rid of that, I'm going to divide by negative 2. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. And I can cross it out on the left side. Now, what I have right away, since I'm dividing by a negative number, I can go ahead and flip my inequality sign. So instead of less than or equal to, I've got greater than or equal to. Now I ask myself, negative 94 divided by negative 2 is going to be positive 47. And on the left side of my inequality sign, all I have left over is n. So I know that n is greater than or equal to 47. I'm going to go ahead and fill this in. On my number line, remember that with your number line, you can space your numbers out however you feel necessary. So you may want to skip every other number or skip every other space, whatever you feel comfortable with. Okay, so there you go. I have my inequality graphed. Now, what we're going to go over is how to write a two-step inequality that represents a certain graph. So if we look here at example 7, okay, I have an inequality graph here in which my dot is between the 24 and the 26, which means that my dot is going to be at 25. So I'm going to use the variable m for McMahon. And since I see that it's a filled in dot, I know I'm going to have the or equal to sign. And since my shading is going towards the greater numbers for 25, I know that m has to be greater than or equal to 25. Okay? Now what I need to do is I need to go ahead and try to find an inequality that simplifies to this answer. Okay, so this might take some guessing and checking. What I would do is go ahead and try to come up with your own. Pause the video and then come back in case you're stuck and you want to take a look at my example. Go ahead and pause the video now. All right, and we're back. So my example that I'm going to use is 1/5 times x plus 5 is greater than or equal to 10. Now, if I was to go ahead and solve this inequality right here, it would solve to m is greater than or equal to 25. Let's try example number 8 on our own. Again, feel free to pause the video and come back to it as soon as you are ready. All right, so I'm going to use the example negative 4x minus 4 is greater than 188. If I was to simplify this down and solve this, I'd find that x has to be less than negative 48. Okay, so these examples would be represented by my graph. Again, there could be multiple examples to these, so you may have gotten different answers, and that's okay. As long as they simplify down to these inequalities, you are A-okay. Go ahead and start the homework to lesson 6 and see your teacher if you have any questions.